From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts. Welcome to Community Catalysts, the podcast about the many paths and forms of local leadership. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. Today, I'm honored to share an extended conversation with Justin Wilson, the former mayor of the city of Alexandria, Virginia, recorded live on May 9th as part of the Spring 2025 Leadership Dialogues hosted by RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative at George Mason University's Schar School of Policy and Government. You can also watch the full interview on YouTube. Just click the link in the program notes.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative, a second leadership dialogue with Mayor Justin Wilson, former mayor of Alexandria, Justin Wilson. My name's Mary Hines. I am a co-director of the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative, which is a program at the Schar School of Government and Policy at George Mason. This is our 8th year of programming, and our programming is designed to support elected and appointed leaders in Nova and actually across the Commonwealth, and to provide practical, implementable information that people can use. We're grateful to AT&T for being RELI's lead sponsor in 2025. And we're, as I said, very excited to have this second leadership dialogue with former Mayor Justin Wilson today. Many of you probably know Mr. Wilson. He was mayor of Alexandria for 6 years, and before that, he served off and on the council for a number of years. Justin grew up in Nova. His roots are deep here. And during his years on the council and as mayor, he led an evolving city, one that was moving beyond its 200-year history into a much a vibrant, blended place where all kinds of people are welcome. He served as mayor during the pandemic, and we hope that we'll hear some from him about the lessons he learned then. And in his day job, Justin works at Amtrak. He's been there almost 2 decades. So he's also very knowledgeable in the transportation field and led Alexandria's Dash bus system to become fare-free, which is also a really interesting story, I think. So without further ado, I'm also pleased to introduce today's moderator. Matt Lehrman is a civic facilitator, mediator, and speaker whose firm, Social Prosperity Partners, specializes in helping municipalities and school boards across the country to navigate complexity, resolve conflict, and strengthen civic trust. He also hosts a Community Catalyst podcast, which explores real-world lessons in local leadership. And RELI has partnered with Matt this year to provide a monthly RELI-sponsored episode that focuses on the challenges and opportunities facing Northern Virginia. So we welcome all of our attendees today. And please, if you have questions as the conversation goes on, use the Q&A function to put those questions in. Matt will be paying attention to them, as will Jay Facette, my co-director, and I. And we'll weave them into the conversation as it makes sense. So without further ado, I turn it over to Matt and Justin. Thanks so much to both of you.
Mary, thank you very much. And thanks again to the Regional Elected Leadership Initiative for creating this forum. Justin Wilson, Mayor, thank you so much. I got so many questions I want to talk about with you, but none more important than this first question. What do you call a former mayor? Or do we still call you mayor? Is it? I have a friend who's a mayor who we refer to as the formerly honorable person. Well, how should we refer to you?
Depending on from who is calling me, it could be has been, it could be anything. Justin works great for this forum. Let's go with
Justin. Thank you so much. So, look, before we get into the questions and concerns from civic leaders throughout Northern Virginia, I want to kind of just frame this out with you a little bit. Over the last month, RELI invited me to lead a couple of focus groups with municipal leaders, school board leaders, and others in Northern Virginia. And what we heard in those focus groups was an expression of worry, demonstrations of community strain as a result of federal policies, but also the fear that speaking out could provoke some sort of backlash. And there are consequences, both personal and also for the communities that the leaders serve that could come from it. So I want to just make sure that I understand the conversation that you and I are going to have today, because you just completed your tenure as mayor of the city of Alexandria. And so I think you have this kind of precious perspective. You're close enough to understand what's happening, but perhaps distant enough that we can ask you to reflect candidly on what it all means and where it's heading. Does that sound like the right level of conversation we should be having today?
Absolutely. I think this is clearly a time of a lot of introspection for government, and I think this is absolutely the conversation we need to be having. So looking forward to it.
So just so you know, and for everyone who's joining us virtually live as well, I've got like 17 different questions, but when I was looking at them last night and again this morning, it occurs to me they are all the same question, and they're all asked in different ways. And the question is, this is happening. What can local leaders do about it? So if you're one of our virtual live audience members, you can ask those questions in the Q&A. I will be looking at those. Mary and Jay are also backing me up to make sure that we're paying attention to everything. Okay, Justin, here's the first question for you, really.
Sure.
When we did the focus groups, we asked local leaders to describe their mood in the current moment. And we heard words like shaky, cranky, watchful. We heard dread and determination. Someone said, I'm just over it. And yet we also heard words like steadfast and protective and ready to lead. And so this wasn't just about professional frustration. This was personal and deeply emotional. What do you make of the mix of emotions that local leaders in Northern Virginia and maybe elsewhere are carrying right now? What's the mood as we're doing this?
Well, I think to answer that question, you have to think about why people get into this business in the first place, right? I always say, right, there's two types of people in politics. Is people want to be something and people want to do something. And, I'm much more fond of the do something people. But there's certainly a fair number of be something people in this business as well. And I think for the do something people, this is a really, really challenging time, because you start off with an incredible amount of just kind of base cynicism that I think has been growing over, one could say the last couple decades, but certainly over the last several years. In our political life, all at every level of government, and you start off with that, and then you have we are clearly beginning what could be a prolonged kind of resource constrained environment. So I think to the extent that folks got into elected office to do things, and most things require money, that's going to be very, very challenging. And then I think there is this kind of constant reaction cycle that we're thrust in right now, where folks who run for office want to do something, they want to shape the agenda, and certainly for folks at the local and even at the state level, that agenda is being shaped for you by factors that are outside of your control. And so you're constantly in this environment where something happens and you're asked, what are you going to do about it? Something happens, what are you going to do about it? And that's not, it's not why we got into this business. For most of us, it's not to be a firefighter. We have great firefighters in local government, but not to fight metaphorical fires. There are things we wanted to accomplish in elected office. And so I think right off the bat, it's understandable why that anxiety is there, because in many cases, most of the folks who are serving signed up for something different.
Yeah. But it does seem to me, and I'm curious, in your time as mayor and on council, if you ever had that experience where it wasn't just that you were going to take a hard position and try to accomplish something. The idea that there would be retaliation, that your arguments could be weaponized against you in some way, that there's a fear that's built into asserting what you think is in the best interests of your community. I don't think that's something that's in the recent memory of a lot of local leaders, if at all.
Well, I would kind of split that up a little bit. So, obviously, anybody who's served in local government, and Mary and Jay know this very well. If you're doing your job well, you're going to make people angry, and it's one of the bigger frustrations of my time in elected office is, the people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. It's when it becomes personal, and I can count on one hand, but very close friends who the friendship fractured because of a political position I took. Very sad, very, very sad, and something that's just frustrating. Because you'd like to think, oh, we have a disagreement about ideas. We can have a disagreement of ideas and work through it, and our relationship transcends that. But sometimes that doesn't always work. But I think what's now layered into this is a feeling that by voicing your opinion, by advocating, in some cases, by advocating on behalf of the constituents that you are representing in a local government, you place your career at risk. You place your constituents at risk for retaliation, and that is new. That is very new and extraordinarily problematic, and something that I think we've seen in throughout our history, but not something that we've been accustomed to seeing here in the United States. Certainly not in mass, and I think that is very, very concerning. And as someone who when I served, also had a career, as you mentioned earlier, as Mary mentioned earlier in my intro, had a career outside of a local government. I have a spouse who has an employment outside of our home, and I have kids who do things. The fact that you're seeing family members and kind of outside careers impacted because of doing perfectly legitimate things, American things like exercising your perspective on issues and advocating for your constituents. That is really scary. That's really scary and troubling.
Really scary. I'm glad that you said those words. That's exactly what I was thinking as well. It's really scary. So I don't know if you got a chance to listen to it. Last week, I got to interview Senator Tim Kaine.
Yep.
And he said something really powerful in the course of that interview. He said, and I'm going to quote here, you might have more of an ability. He was speaking to local leaders in Northern Virginia, right? The same forum. He says, you might have more of an ability to create believers in democracy at the local level because people feel distant from the state and federal levels. And I think he was really urging local leaders to serve as visible personal proof that democracy can still work. How does that resonate with your experience?
Well, first of all, almost everything Tim says is 100% on target and correct. And so Tim was absolutely right. And, but I'll give you a great example. And it was a source of great frustration real time. But in kind of perspective, I get it. We, during the last year of my term as mayor, really last year and a half, we had a lot of folks who were coming to our council meetings, protesting our council meetings, protesting in front of City Hall about a very intractable international issue going on in the Middle East right now. And I was constantly frustrated because here I am. I wanted to talk about, transit and dog parks and schools. And I had people trying to drag me in to an international issue that I have no role or any role in at all. And asking us to take different positions on this very, very complex issue that has been playing out for millennia. And I remember having these conversations because, as we do in local government, we try to engage. I think, as Senator Kaine said, we try to engage with people one-on-one and have smaller meetings. And so I would meet with these folks and I would talk to them and I'd say, gosh, why are you trying to drag me into this issue? This is an irrelevant issue to what we're doing in local government. And inevitably, what I would hear is exactly what Senator Kaine said. We're talking to you because you're accessible.
Right.
We can't, and we have great representation in Washington. But we can't access the Congress. We can't access the White House. We can't. Those are institutions that are difficult for us to influence. But we know that for 3 minutes on a Saturday, we can come in front of the Alexandria City Council and we can tell you what we think. And then if we don't even like that 3 minutes, we can send you an email or send you a Facebook message or whatever and say, hey, can we have a meeting? And we'll have a meeting with them and talk to them about this issue. Now, I think I would calmly explain that we have no role in it. It's not really something for us to weigh in on. But the fact that we were accessible gave them hope and gave them an avenue. And so while I was very frustrated, and still in some cases remain frustrated, I understood it. And I think there is a kind of a larger feeling, whether on a whole myriad of issues right now, where people feel helpless and they feel like they cannot make change on these issues. And local government, because of both the geographic proximity, but also just the kind of systemic accessibility, becomes the vehicle for that. And so, and in some ways, I got to say it's a positive in some ways, but despite the misdirection.
So I want to ask what advice you would give if you were in the advice giving business to other local leaders, and not just in Northern Virginia, but even anywhere else around the country. Would you tell them to tell their constituents, hey, those issues are beyond me, that, we don't do that at city council, take them up with your representative or something else? Or would you turn around and say, you know what, in this moment, we need to double down. We need to invite more people on whatever topics they care about at whatever level to come to us, to share with us, because they need to know that there are government leaders who care and who are listening and who, to the best of their ability, will be helpful.
I think the answer is both of what you said. I think you balance the two, right? In some measure, the most limited currency you have in local government is time. It's not money. It's time, and a government can only focus on a limited number of things at a moment. And so, when you're talking about one thing and you're debating one thing, it means you're not talking about and debating something else. And so, I was always, particularly during my time on council, and I would always advise any elected official, you be careful about what you devote your time to and what you devote your attention to, because you have a limited amount of time that you serve. On the flip side, though, I think there is an opportunity to channel that advocacy into something that can be productive. I think while the city of Alexandria, using my example, is not going to weigh in and provide detailed input on the conduct of an international war being waged by two unrelated parties to the city of Alexandria, there are things that we can do in the city that relate to that and relate to larger humanitarian need. And that's what we should work to channel. So I think I never, I made it as a hallmark for me that, I would respond to everyone, I'd meet everyone, throughout my tenure. And so I'm never going to tell people, just no. Mm-hmm. But I think you also want to explain to people how they can channel what is a really, I think, a positive energy into something productive.
Okay, so let's move on, because across the focus groups, we also heard a concern that public trust isn't just eroding in government, it's eroding between neighbors. And one person told us, we used to believe that the rule of law existed to help us. Now it's been weaponized so badly, some people don't even feel safe going to the grocery store. So in this moment, how do you see the responsibility of leaders in local government to even tackle that kind of breakdown in social trust within their communities?
Yeah, no, it's a serious.
And have you seen it yourself?
Yeah, we've definitely seen it play out. I mean, I think anybody would tell you in local government, some of the most difficult things to deal with, and some of the most difficult things our city agencies get involved with are these like neighbor on neighbor disputes. I always tell people, just maintain good relations with your neighbors, because when it goes bad, it goes really bad. And we get, city agencies of all kinds get dragged into those different things. And I have seen, I think, more of those than I ever saw. And, Some of that is just it's a reflection of the difficult times. I think people are experiencing a lot of crazy stuff right now, and they're kind of bringing it home into their neighborhood. Just like you bring stress home to your house, I think you bring that stress home to your neighborhood as well. And so I think kind of navigating those and providing an opportunity for conflict resolution and mediation is certainly a positive. But I also think one of the opportunities local government has that doesn't exist at the federal level at all, and is unfortunately a door closing at the state level, is we can actually get things done. And, I think part of the frustration that, regardless of what your political motivation is, part of the frustration that I think we have all across our country, and I think you see this play out around the world too, is a feeling that government is not doing things, in the public interest, not accomplishing anything that moves us forward. And I think we actually have the ability in local government to push back against that by actually doing stuff. I mean, one of the great things about being on city council, and part of the reason I would never want to serve in any other form of or a level of government, is, as a member of city council, I had to convince 3 other people that what I wanted to do was the right thing, and I had a majority, right? And we could move something forward. And generally, I didn't even have to do that. Most of the time, I just had to send an email, to a staff member and say, "Hey, what about this?" And things happened. And so, I think making government work for people is one of the ways that you build that faith, break down that cynicism, and help kind of, at least at a local level, people believe again.
Do you think that the situation that we're in now, this breakdown of trust that was talked about in the focus group, is this reminiscent of, does it remind you of the experience of governing through the COVID pandemic? I mean, there was a time when, we separated ourselves for medical reasons, right? For safety. And there were, suspicions about government motivations and concerns about overreach, and somehow, it's that, but it's more so now. And I'm wondering if there were any actions that you learned or that you took during your time as mayor during COVID that were actually like specific, tangible actions where you said, we're doing this because we're trying to reweave the social fabric.
So first of all, I can spend about 45 minutes to an hour just talking about COVID. So obviously, anybody who served during COVID will tell you that was an extraordinary experience, and one that you can take a whole variety of different lessons from. I guess a couple things I would say. So first, one of the things that was unique about COVID, and I think anybody who serves in local government will see this, is you have residents who need different things out of local government. We have residents in the city of Alexandria who live in a luxury condo on the waterfront, that has a condo association that tends to most of their direct needs. They don't have kids in the schools. They rarely have to call the fire department or the police department. They're not regularly commuting. They don't need a lot out of local government. And then we have folks who are receiving a variety of different social services, have kids in the schools, are riding transit every day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they have kind of a lot of different services where they touch the city. And during COVID, everyone needed kind of the same thing out of government, regardless of your station in life. You were looking to government to help keep you safe, and obviously some folks needed other things, but everyone had some kind of base need out of government, and it's kind of an equalizer in a way during that period of time. And I saw incredible positives, people, trying to find ways to help and chipping in and doing extraordinary things at the local level that we just hadn't seen before. The other thing that I think was really interesting about COVID, and I'll say this as a positive, was it helped people kind of better understand their communities in a way where I think in our daily lives we don't. And the example I'd offer of that is I'm sitting right now in my home. I live in the 22305 zip code, which is the northeast corner of Alexandria. This zip code is interesting. It includes Arlandria, which is a mostly lower income, primarily Latino community. It also includes a portion of Del Rey and a portion of Northridge, which is primarily white, upper middle class community. And for most of COVID, we were in the top 10 zip codes of hospitalizations and deaths around the state. And I was constantly hearing from residents in my area of 22305 who would call me and email me, and they'd say, "I don't understand. I'm staying at home. I haven't gone out. I'm wearing my mask. I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to do. But why are we so high on this list?" And and I would explain to people, I was like, well, there's a whole part of your community that you're not aware of. And I think it was a very revealing process for people. And I think, and obviously I'll talk longer about vaccinations later, but I think those are some positives of that experience. So sorry, that was a windy way to answer your question, though.
Right, but I guess I want to be really specific now. Just we're looking for concrete ideas here. Yeah. So, given that experience, what would you tell local leaders now, again, in Northern Virginia and anywhere around the country that might be dealing with the same thing? What is something specific that they can do to help reweave the social fabric of their communities? What's their role or responsibility towards that? Where is there an opportunity?
Well, I would go to where I ended, and maybe this sounds cliche, but I think helping folks understand, like Mr. Rogers said, right, the people in your neighborhood, right? Helping folks understand who's in their community and what their needs are and what their priorities are. Because I think we have gotten to a place in society, I think technology is a part of it, and the way we live our lives, where you can kind of hang out with one kind of person and people who feel one way about something and never pay attention to anything else. And so you got to you have to find ways in your lives and lives of our residents where they can take themselves out of that comfort zone. And everyone's going to have a different thing. It could be your kid's sports team. It could be a nonprofit, a club, some kind of organizational way to get out of your kind of social comfort zone and understand the community and build back those connections.
Connections is exactly the word that I was going to bring up. That was my big takeaway from last week from my interview with Senator Kaine, which was I asked him kind of a similar question. And I think I repeated back, we talked about, well, you have to be responsive and you have to be transparent and all those kinds of things. I repeated it back and he said, no. He says, you missed the most important one, and that's connection. He says that the work of local governance is about connecting to people and connecting people and making them understand what's going on in their community. You took a little bit of a longer way to get there, but I think your point is exactly the same, which is in local government, the superpower that you bring is your ability to make people feel connected to each other and to the decision making that's going on. Am I summarizing that?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I we tried very hard. I think one of the positives of COVID for us is the kind of democratization of that decision-making process. Because in the past, right, the people who influence government are the people who can show up at a city council meeting on a Saturday, at 9:30 in the morning and testify for 3 minutes, or they could show up at a rec center at 7:00 at night and come to some community meeting and wait for 2 hours and say their piece, right? And the technology of COVID, essentially, the ability to do Zoom meetings and Teams calls and whatever, we dramatically increased the number of people who were actually engaged in local government, and that's actually hung around. And those people are continuing to connect and continuing to be involved in the government. And I think both connecting them with the government, but then connecting them with themselves is how you break down those barriers that you're talking about.
I'm going to ask you to summarize something that I think everyone in Northern Virginia and in the DC suburbs, understands, but I want you to explain it for people who don't live, in or around the Beltway. We heard in the focus groups, local leaders said that that the communities in the DC area are being affected not just incidentally by what the administration is doing, but deliberately targeted because of who lives there. Federal employees and immigrants and highly educated professionals, because of what these communities are seen to represent. Can you explain that sense so someone outside of Washington understands what's going on? And then I'll ask you, what we do about that.
Yeah. And let me give some foundation here about how I approach this issue, because I think this is a very interesting question. So I am the son of two federal employees, both retired federal employees. I am married to a federal employee. And so I have kind of grown up around those who serve our federal government my entire life, and I see the dedication that they put in it. And then as a local government official, I had the opportunity to serve a community that perhaps has more federally connected people, either federal employees, federal contractors, people who sell to the federal government, than any other community on the planet. And so I have always kind of seen this as a normal thing. And you are right that that kind of the environment we have built here, it has been built over generations in this community, is very much targeted and is very much under attack as kind of illegitimate work, essentially, as illegitimate a way to earn a paycheck. And so you have a community that, regardless of their political motivation, is very demoralized and feels like they are being targeted by for just doing a job and doing a career that is we used to celebrate and honor. And so I think that has affected the entire community, and one that goes broader than just federal employees. We have Alexandria as a community where a quarter of our population was born in another country. One of the highest percentages of immigrants around, including large populations of some of the specific immigrant categories that have been targeted. So we have a large number of holders of TPS, temporary protective status visas. Obviously, also a large population of undocumented folks. Our schools are disproportionately so, disproportionately immigrant, disproportionately English language learners, disproportionately folks who have various visa statuses, even more so than the broader community. And so, we are a community made up of populations that very much feel like they are under attack right now.
So you use the word attack, and so I have to ask you, if it's an attack, and I think you're right, then what do local leaders do to play defense, and what can they do to play offense?
This is actually something that I feel like is changing. Because I was on council and mayor during the first Trump administration. And then obviously left office as the new administration was coming in, and I do think I would suggest that we are getting smarter about how we address some of these threats. In that, I think so much of the last administration was there was a lot more kind of activism in reacting to it. It was, we have to speak out. We have to speak out. And I think, to your question earlier, while there is a place for that, and I think we still have to do that, right now the focus is more, how do we protect those that are vulnerable, ensure that that they have the services of government, and also try not to create a situation where we end up making those people more vulnerable. And as an example, I would draw out our school superintendent put out a statement back in January here in Alexandria, and she was obviously getting a lot of pressure in with the transition about the vulnerabilities of some of our students. And people were asking, what are you going to do to prevent our students from, being, arrested by ICE? What are you going to do to prevent our students who are vulnerable to these kinds of federal actions? And she put out a very measured statement that talked about, these are the things we can do. These are the things we can't do. This is what the law allows us to do. And this is, what we would have to respect this if this happened. And she was criticized, by some in the community who felt like it wasn't as forceful as it should have been. But I think she was trying, as I think everyone in local government right now is trying to balance that line where you provide useful information to those that you serve and you provide services that you can provide, but also not just simply for a cathartic kind of activist exercise. You don't do something that actually could end up making them more vulnerable. And I think it was
Can I just
say one more thing? I think it was notable that the criticism that she received was typically from the communities that are not vulnerable in this in what's going on right now, or at least not at the moment. And they were reacting on behalf of other folks who they were working to protect.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really appreciated that you reframed my question, and I think you improved it immeasurably, because I asked, what do we do on defense or to play offense? And what you really said was, it's not about offense or defense. It's about taking care of the people who are vulnerable, taking care of people in this moment. And that seems to me a very human and humane initial reaction to have. So I was just going to acknowledge that. But let's take it one more step, because we also heard from a lot of people in Northern Virginia that they were concerned about silent cuts. That is, that there's a kind of a downstream effect of federal funding decisions that one leader said we might not even see until it's too late. Things like housing vouchers and school nutrition programs and community health grants. What else would you add to that list? What are the things that local leaders in Northern Virginia should be paying attention to where those vulnerabilities actually exist?
Sure. I mean, I'll give you one right off the bat. And again, as a son of two federal employees and the husband of a federal employee, right now the Congress is talking about benefit reductions to federal employees. For most of the country, that's not really relevant. In a community like Alexandria, where you have 16,000 federal employees and thousands of retirees on top of that, if you're talking about making large changes to the benefit package that federal employees are paid and are relying on in their retirement, that has an impact on the economics of this region. That is a significant revenue source that goes into this region that we don't think of like that, but it's supporting our real estate market, which is how we fund government, certainly in Northern Virginia, and it's affecting kind of the overall vitality of the government. So yeah, there's big impacts on direct to citizen, direct to resident programs that are federal programs. There's big impacts on funding to direct to government programs and grants. But then there's also the impact that the federal government can have on the economy in this region, which I think is certainly even beyond job relocations or job reductions, which certainly have an impact. That's something we're very, very fearful of right now. But even beyond that, it's kind of what, even for the people who are remaining, what they're paid and how they're compensated and all that. So yeah, it's a huge challenge for us. It's also not something that is new. I mean, we have been saying for decades in this region, we have to diversify our economy. We can't be so dependent on the federal government. And I think what's happened right now is that that threat has just become dramatically accelerated. That's what's happened, not a difference.
I'm going to just give a reminder to our virtual live audience that if you have a question that you would like for former Mayor Justin Wilson to talk about, I would just invite you to write that into the Q&A, and I am looking to there to see if anyone has something specific that they want us to talk about, maybe a specific policy or a specific question that you'd like answered. I'm looking for those. Justin, Senator Kaine made the case that in this climate, the most resilient communities will be those that keep investing in people, especially in education and talent and innovation. And I wonder if, in your experience in City of Alexandria, if there was a specific example you could point to where you saw the truth of that, you saw a demonstration of it, or are you aware of anything else in Northern Virginia that you would point to and say, this is something we're already doing well, or we could be doing this, but we should even be ramping that up to a greater degree?
Yeah, sure. I could cite a couple examples here, right? So certainly, one of the larger economic development initiatives for the city that we were involved with was what we did in partnership with our friends in Arlington and with the Commonwealth, and that was the attraction of Amazon and Virginia Tech to this region. And Alexandria's piece was Virginia Tech. Arlington was Amazon. And we paired Virginia Tech with Amazon because I think in the Commonwealth's wisdom, they knew that what Amazon was looking for was not just a place to put buildings, but they were looking for the ability to attract talent to work in those buildings and help them innovate in the future. And so we ended up creating the Virginia Tech Innovation Campus, which just opened up a high-tech graduate facility here in Potomac Yard that's going to churn out people who are working on some of the very technology that will continue to create jobs in this region in our country in the future. And so what I think we learned in that experience was, Amazon had options elsewhere in the country that were giving them more money, that were giving them a better tax advantage and all that. But they came here because they believed that over time they would continue to be able to find the talent, the people who could help build an ecosystem that they wanted. And I think to Tim's point that he made with you guys last week, it's the investment in people, it's the investment in talent that is ultimately what drives economic development. Folks are not going to locate a company that is intending to grow in a place where they're not going to be able to find people that are going to help them grow. The people who will help them innovate are going to want to live in a place that supports that environment. And so I think, and that's not just a college investment or graduate school investment. It's a K through 12 investment. It's building a quality of life of a community that supports people and supports the types of places people would want to be. And I think this is this kind of a larger issue for this entire region. If you think back to, I think about Alexandria. Mary cut us short by 75 years when she was introducing us. Said we were 200 us. We were 275. But we were founded originally because we were close to the Potomac River and they wanted access to the river for tobacco, right? We thrived over generations because we were close to the railroad, and Potomac Yard was one of the largest railroad locations in the world. And then we continue to thrive over the last a century or so because of the proximity to federal government, the growth of the federal government. And the reality is a lot of those advantages, the physical proximity, those go away in 2025. Those are not as significant in 2025. And that's even before you had a president who's talking about moving federal agencies out of the area and all this stuff. And so we do have to invest in the things that make people want to live here, not just simply because their employer is here. And I think that is investing in people and investing in the quality of life of our community.
So I was going to ask you, maybe you just answered the question. If Senator Kaine, if I give him the first strategy of what we should be investing in, he said we invest in education. I was going to ask you to build on that. What's the next strategy that folks in Northern Virginia should be investing in? Is it building sense of place? Is that what you were just saying, or is it something different?
I think so. I think it is obviously place building is important from a planning perspective, but it's also the quality of life. It's parks, it's walkability, it's. I mean, you think about the places that people want to live, and that's what that's what you have to build. And I always tell people, right? You think about where you want to go vacation, right?
Right.
People flock to a lot of these European cities because they have walkability, they have scale, they have culture, they have the things that support a good tourist experience. And the same is true for where you want to live, right? You want the ability to find interesting people, interesting places, and enjoy life in the times that you're not having to work. And I think
Right.
We have a responsibility to build communities that support that. And so that not only means educational investments, not only means park investments, that means a transportation network that works, that means housing that is accessible and available. Those are all things that kind of drive economic growth.
I'll just add a personal note here. My wife and I met when we were living in Arlington, and almost 37 years ago, when I proposed to her, we did it standing out back behind the torpedo factory, where the cherry blossom paddle boat comes in, which was the site of one of our first dates. So Alexandria is near and dear to our hearts.
Well, my wife and I had our second date on the waterfront, right behind the torpedo factory. So there you go.
So Justin, here's something that I've learned from all these interviews that I've done with leaders in Northern Virginia that RELI has helped sponsor, and it's been a privilege to learn this, that Northern Virginia is genuinely known for this extraordinary level of collaboration among local governments. That's from the school districts to the cities to the regional, the counties. And I'm wondering, in this moment, what you can tell us is the work of collaboration that's going on among them. Perhaps there are things that are even unseen to the public at large, but are really important. And then I would even ask you to go, a little bit further and say, what do you hope that that collaboration would do in the near future or going forward?
Well, let me just say, first of all, let me start with RELI, right? So I think the work that RELI does is really, really important in building those relationships, because I think part of that kind of core collaboration, I mean, I am very fortunate to have very close relationships with local electeds around the region who I served with and continue. Some of us are out of office, and we still stay in very good touch about things that are going on. And some of that is just a core, there's some of the few people in this area who understand what I was going through, understand the life that we were all living. That's just helpful to compare notes with people who are dealing with the same personal pressures, but also some of the same policy questions that we're all dealing with. And so I think those connections are really, really important in the region. I saw during COVID an extraordinary level of collaboration that I had never seen before, where we, at all three levels of government, quite honestly, we were constantly communicating on a daily basis about what we were dealing with and how to respond. And, with no framework to go on, we were just kind of responding to the issues of the day and comparing notes and copying each other. And it was an extraordinary amount of collaboration. I think a lot of it has continued. Now we compete. And I know Jay will roll his eyes, right? We attract employers across the region, Patent and Trademark Office, National Science Foundation came over here from Arlington, things like that happen. And certainly Alexandria was involved in a pretty high profile, ultimately failed effort to attract a large employer from Washington, D.C. To Potomac Yard last year. And so there is certainly competition that happens across those lines. But ultimately, I think there's a recognition that most of what we deal with is in collaboration in some way. I mean, Alexandria is 15 and a half square miles. There is, while I get really excited when I cross the border, most of our residents know there's nothing magical about crossing 4 Mile Run and crossing the Beltway on the south. That they cross these borders multiple times a day, and so I think from a local government perspective, we have to collaborate that way. Now, I think we have some services that have historically been provided that way. I mean, I would speak to, obviously, fire department's probably the best example, where we provide that almost a jurisdictionally blind approach. And then we certainly partner together on police and other services. But I think there's a lot more opportunity at the government level to think differently about how we provide services to our residents, because it's a lot of these boundaries are largely artificial as we provision services.
Justin, as a former mayor, you know how closely the work of local government depends on decisions made at the state level.
Yep.
From funding formulas to policy direction, the General Assembly plays a huge role in shaping what's possible for cities, counties, and school boards. With that in mind, and knowing that Speaker of the House Don Scott will be joining us for a conversation just like this on Friday, May 23rd, what do you believe the state legislature should be doing right now to support local governments?
I know the convenient answer is always, get out of the way and give us money, right? That's the convenient answer, and certainly there's places where we would love to see the General Assembly give us more flexibility and help us in that way. I also think that there's a laundry list of kind of legislative ideas I could give you and things like that. I do think we have had, and this is not a partisan thing, because I think it's both Democratic General Assemblies and Republican General Assemblies have fallen victim to this, that there has been a tendency in Richmond to see us as enemy is the wrong term, but not see us as real partners in how we serve really the same constituents. And I think that manifests itself in the way policies are adopted, and the way issues are talked about in Richmond. And so clearly, every local government in Virginia is going to tell you they want Richmond to give them more money and give them more authority to do the things that we feel like we need to do in our community. And clearly, just like we do at the local level, the state has a limited amount of resources that they have to allocate and all that. But I do think there's also big differences in kind of a worldview, right? The General Assembly members are in session for 45 or 60 days every alternating years.
Sure.
And they are not generally getting in long, in-depth conversations with constituents about issues. It's much more of a kind of a surface input. We are much more engaged in a prolonged format. And so I think we just see issues sometimes a little differently, and the ability of how we affect change on those is just very different.
Justin, this is where I want to ask you to lean into the fact that you're not currently in office. You have this opportunity to lay it out here. When I interview the speaker, what do you want me to press him on behalf of all the local cities and towns? What should we be asking for right now?
Well, I will say this, and first of all, I speak very high. I think very highly of Speaker Scott, and we during my time when he was Speaker and as I was leaving as mayor, we had the opportunity to work together, and he was a great partner for us in Richmond. I will say this: as Northern Virginia grapples with perhaps one of the most significant economic challenges that we have ever experienced in this region. I am very concerned that economic development, how we create jobs, has become a partisan issue in Richmond. And I think you have a General Assembly, and we've seen this over the last couple of years, that has allowed economic development to become a casualty of partisan warfare with the governor, and sometimes within the assembly itself, even within the party in charge of the assembly in both houses. And that is a tragedy, because part of the reason that Virginia has been so successful economically for so long is because regardless of whether it's Republicans or Democrats in the governor's mansion or controlling the General Assembly, everyone knew that we needed to work together to create jobs and sustain jobs in the Commonwealth, because ultimately that was going to protect our quality of life. And specifically in Northern Virginia, given the amount of economic vitality that Northern Virginia on its own creates for the rest of the Commonwealth, there was a feeling that we had to support economic growth in Northern Virginia. And I think there is a disconnect right now. And as we head into this really challenging moment for economic development in Northern Virginia, that's scary. That's scary. We need Richmond to be rowing in the same direction as we are in trying to create and preserve jobs in this region, and recognizing that inertia is not going to do it.
Is that just another way of saying that Northern Virginia is a huge economic engine for the Commonwealth, and continued investment in that is necessary to keep the whole state healthy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's at risk. It's at significant risk.
Justin, I have one last question. We got about 45 seconds for your answer, and then I will turn this back to Mary for a final announcement. You've led through crisis and calm. You've seen close up how regional collaboration can flourish or fracture under stress. What would you say is the most urgent shared priority right now for local leaders across Northern Virginia?
Exactly where I was. It has to be economic development. You can't invest in schools. You can't invest in transportation. You can't invest in human services. You can't invest in housing. You can't invest in parks. You can't invest in anything if you don't have any money. And the fact is, the quality of life that we have expected and depended on and relied on for generations in this region is very much at risk. And that is a risk that is going to continue to magnify over the next several years. And if we don't have a plan, we don't have a vision, and we don't have everyone working in the same direction, that is a big, big problem.
Mayor Justin Wilson, former Mayor Justin Wilson, thank you for being open to the conversation. Thanks for your thoughtfulness and for your candor. And it's a pleasure speaking with you. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Let me
also, Mary, let me just finish this by saying thank you to RELI, because Mary won't do it herself. I have to say it. Thank you to RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative at George Mason University, for bringing us all together. Thank you to everyone who joined us live. Thank you for your interest, your participation. I'm just going to reflect that there's one powerful theme that I have heard emerge from all these conversations. Whether you're on a school board, city council, county board, regional authority, the future of our democracy isn't only shaped in Washington. It rests in your hands and in how the people of your community come together to meet this moment. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. I thank everyone for being a part of this vital conversation. Thank you for all that you do to lead in your community. Mary, it's time for your wrap-up.
Thanks so much, Matt. And thank you for conducting such a great interview. And Justin, thank you again for joining us as our special guest. To everybody who's on this call, who's in leadership, please hang in there. Life is tumultuous and turned upside down. But if we are talking to each other and working together, we have a better chance of getting through it. I do want to give two shout outs. One is if you're interested in the practical uses of artificial intelligence in public school operations and classrooms, please consider registering for our in-person summit on May 22nd from 10 to 2 at George Mason Square in Arlington. And as Matt has mentioned, our next leadership dialogue is at noon on Friday, May 23rd, with Speaker of the House, Virginia House of Delegates, Don Scott. And we hope you'll join us for that. And we will be posting Justin's interview on our website, and Matt will be putting it on the podcast. So it's going to be out there for you to share with your friends if you found this helpful. So again, thanks very much, Justin and Matt. Appreciate you both for being here today.
Many thanks to RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative at George Mason University's Schar School of Policy and Government, for inviting me to lead this conversation and for their continued sponsorship of Community Catalysts. It's a privilege to help amplify the voices of local leaders across Northern Virginia. And thanks again to Mayor Justin Wilson for his openness and clarity. His reflections remind us that leadership in uncertain times requires more than responsiveness. It calls for purpose and persistence and a clear vision for what comes next. If you found this episode meaningful, please rate and review it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Your feedback helps others discover the show, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. If you have a question or a comment about today's conversation, I'd love to hear from you. Reach me at 602-688-2724 or Matt, M-A-T-T, at socialprosperity.us. Do you have a story of local leadership? Click the podcast guest link in the show notes. I'm always looking for thoughtful and inspiring voices to share. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.